close your eyes and do a little exercise with me very quickly. I want you to imagine that you just got engaged and you planned a beautiful wedding. You invited the people who mean the most to you. You picked out a different dress of a different color. You found a white barn in the country. You picked the exact flowers that you've always thought were the most pretty. You even added touches from the cake, flavors, and decorations to the rest of the dessert table, handmade, fresh macarons. So much time and planning has gone into this day, and you just can't wait to be standing there looking at your new husband. Now I want you to imagine what that looks like in your head, and imagine that you've now come to the day before your wedding. And you have to cancel. It's a feeling that unless you put yourself in that position, you can't imagine it. Now, if your eyes are still closed, I want you to think of something else. I want you to imagine that your parent has just had a major surgery that they needed to save their life. And they came out of it to open their eyes and be extremely confused. They're unsure of where they're at, what day it is, what role you play, and why they're there. Finally, the last scenario that I am going to talk about, and I want you to relate to today and think about, is that you have a child who is in a hospital bed, hemorrhaging and bleeding out. There's no doctor, and your child is yelling your name. Those three scenarios that I just asked you to imagine actually happened to me. And they did within a 6-month period of each other. This is going to be a very tough episode to get through. It's extremely emotional for me, which is why there's nobody else here. So I want to invite you all to hear this story because I'm going to explain to you how I went from watching church online and maybe going on the holidays to praying for people in gas station parking lots and starting a ministry. And it has everything to do with those three experiences. I am Melissa. Welcome back. This is the Christian Women's Ministry Podcast. If you've been staying up to date, you will know that we took the month of December off. A lot happened in December, and I'm going to be making a short video in our women's group on Facebook to talk about that. Ministry can look like a lot of things. Things that sometimes you don't always anticipate. So some days ministry just looks like praying for somebody over the phone and you don't get to make the videos. But we are going to talk about that at a later time. Welcome back. I'm so glad to have everybody here, and a lot of people reached out during that period and just said, we miss you. How are you? I just want to tell you all that those messages meant the world to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I had decided to do this topic in December, and I'm not sure if the devil just didn't want me to talk about it, or he just didn't want me to talk about anything, because a lot of things happened. But this was an important story for me to tell. And originally, I was going to make TikToks, 3 TikToks about it, and put those out. For those of you who don't know, we are on TikTok, and we don't do a lot on there. You know, it's not. I'm not technically savvy, but I do put out certain clips from the shows after they're out, and I do make little snippets of, you know, teasers for the upcoming people that are going to be on, and some other things. So you might want to check that out. Also, since we're on that subject, if you have not subscribed to our channel, now would be a good time. Hit that subscribe button for us, because it's all about algorithms, and you know, we want our story to get, our podcast to be accessible to those women who need it, because you know, as women, we know that sometimes you just feel so alone, like nobody hears you or nobody understands you, and you could be in a household full of your family or your friends, and you know, sometimes it feels good to hear from a woman who can speak right to your heart. So that's why it's important to me that we get these videos out there, and that they're seen and heard, and they could touch lives. So I'm going to pray very quickly, short prayer, and then we're going to get into it. Heavenly Father, please, please, Lord, speak through me today. Let these ladies hear your words. Lord, I only want your thoughts and what you want me to say about these experiences that I had, Lord, that you took me through. I ask that you walk me through this. It's going to be very emotional, Lord. Please be here with me. Holy Spirit, I invite your presence in this place and into the place of everyone watching. Lord, I love you. I'm doing this for you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so in 2021, I got engaged to my now husband, who I absolutely was so excited to marry. This was a second marriage for both of us. And in a lot of ways, we didn't get to have the wedding that maybe we always wanted the first time around. So, you know, a lot of thought and planning went into this wedding. Side story, when my husband proposed, you know, we had talked about just having a destination wedding, or just having something small. But after some time, like this was both of our, and really his more than mine, ideas, where we, you know, he really wanted to have his family and his friends watch us get married and have something that was, you know, classy and romantic. And I know that that's hard to believe, but everything that, you know, we picked was classy and romantic. We planned this wedding in 6 months. We got engaged in February, and our wedding was scheduled for August 28th. Now, this was during COVID, and I believe the vaccines were just newly out, but people were still afraid of COVID. A lot of people had passed away at this point, and, you know, neither of us had COVID as far as we knew at that point. We were cautious and wore masks, you know, washed our hands. So the closer that we got to August of that year, you know, a lot of time, money, and energy went into that day, and it was going to be something like I had never dreamed I would have ever in my life. It was more than I could have ever prayed for. My dress, I picked this beautiful dress it was sort of pinkish. You know, we had, I think, 300 or 400 macarons handmade. This beautiful cake, which, by the way, I had not gotten to see. I saw kind of drawings. We did cake testings. We looked at venues. We were going to serve shrimp tacos and filet, which, you know, we like to eat. My husband and I love food. And so we didn't want it to be just like, you know, chicken and rigatonis. We wanted to like really put it out there for our guests. And, you know, we had seating charts. We had the whole 9 yards. And then about 2 weeks before the wedding, his family was going to the beach in Outer Banks. And they had asked us if we wanted to come prior to us even getting engaged. So we thought sure, because, you know, Scott has a little girl, my stepdaughter, and, you know, we were going to be taking a trip after the wedding, obviously just the two of us. So we thought, well, that'll be a good chance for us to have a little family vacation as well. We would leave and return about 1 week exactly before our wedding. So we took her on that trip, and, you know, it was a nice little trip. You know, she enjoyed herself. We enjoyed ourselves. And then we got back, like I said, a week before the wedding. I would say probably Tuesday or Wednesday of that week, he started to say that his back hurt. And we had been going to work during the day and then staying up late at night to get things done for the wedding. You know, just things ready that needed to be ready. So we weren't getting a lot of sleep. We were going to bed late, getting up early. So I was like, well, maybe you're just tired. I gave him some Advil. And, you know, we went to bed one night. I think it was that Wednesday night before the wedding, early. When he woke up Thursday morning, this is 2 days before the wedding, he said his head hurt and his back hurt. And I immediately was full of fear. If it had been anything, like the flu, or I'm not saying, you know, terminal illnesses, I'm saying just viruses, and, you know, we might have made it through. But it wasn't. So the day before, Friday morning, when he woke up and he still wasn't well, we had our vehicles packed to take things to the venue. Signs and cases of water and alcohol and things like that. And he still wasn't well, and he said he was starting to feel worse. And we had this moment where we just said, let's do a drive-through clinic and just make sure it's not COVID. When we got to the drive-through clinic, you know, they came out and they swabbed him. I was fine, so they didn't swab me. And then we waited, and I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed, and I just kept saying, everything's going to be fine. It's going to be negative. And, but I knew when the doctor opened the door and he came out in like this hazmat suit, and he came over to the car, and I was driving, and he tapped the window with a pen. There was this just like the air had been sucked out of that vehicle. And instead of just saying, you know, what it was, I'll never forget those words. It was, Mr. Williams, I understand you're getting married tomorrow, It looks like you'll have some phone calls to make. It was not a death sentence. It was not you lost your family. It was not your house burnt down. You lost a parent. But it held its own weight in terms of this is heavy. This is a lot. Now, a lot of people had to cancel weddings during COVID, which at the time I was ignorant to that fact. I didn't know that. I did not know. I knew that some were delayed. I had heard, but I did not know that there were brides that canceled 2 and 3 times. Now, that was during the shutdowns. This was something else. This was my fiance at the time got COVID the day before our wedding. When we drove back to the house, it was completely silent because I think he felt like he disappointed me and I was, going to be mad at him. And I was silent because I just kept saying, well, where are you, God? I thought everything was going to be fine, So when we got back to the house and we pulled in, we did not get out and we waited and had that conversation of, now what? We called our venue first and she tried to find ways for this wedding to still go on. Some of those suggestions were, we can stick you outside in a field and you can watch it from outside. You just can't come inside and no one can come over to you. We'll get really good pictures. The weather's supposed to be nice. Another suggestion was get married and then Melissa just comes to the reception alone. Another suggestion was give everybody the opportunity. If they don't want to come, tell them he's positive and just have him wear a mask and self, distance. I heard God very specifically say, you need to do the right thing. Sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing. And so I made a phone call to all of our guests and vendors. By that time, the flowers were made and the cake was made and the macarons were made and the food was being prepared. The baker said, what do you want me to do? Do you want to see the cake? And I said, no. Throw it away. The caterer, I told her to donate the food, which she did. The flowers, I said take them to a funeral home or a church. I came inside, I turned off all the lights in my house, and I went to bed. And I didn't get out of bed. The next day, which this was my wedding day, I had 500 napkins monogrammed with this date. I had guest seating charts with the date. Champagne glasses. August 28th. The hardest part about that day was when it was 2:30 and I was supposed to be at the church getting married to him. The hardest part was that he had COVID and he couldn't touch me. He couldn't hug me. I couldn't hug him. So, you envision this day in your head where, okay, so I'm going to be kissing him around 2:45 and I had violins going to be playing and I picked the song and we went from violins and kissing to I'm going to be upstairs, you're going to be downstairs. Now, with that being said, I didn't know how sick he was going to get either. And so I was, again, fearful. My thing was, what do I do if he gets really sick? What do I do if I don't ever get to marry him? There's a lot of quiet parts that we don't always say out loud. And I don't know why. I don't know why we don't. I guess because when you say them out loud, they're scary to hear. But I think that once I got over the shock, I just worried about him. Now, obviously, he got better, right? Praise God. And after he got better, there was a period of time where I had that conversation with God, like, do you not want me to marry him? Are we not supposed to get married? A lot of people ask me if we were still going to get married. And I would be lying if I didn't say, I didn't think to myself, like, well, was this God? Was God trying to tell me not to? I mean, I love him. He loves me. All of our plans were for the future together. And so it was a scary thought to say, like, is this God's way? And so he and I had a lot of conversations, very honest conversations that looked a lot like, are we going to do this? Is this for life? No matter what. And so we decided then that we were going to reschedule that wedding for 3 weeks out in September on a Thursday night, which was the only date that the vendor, she would have given us a Monday, I'm sure, but we picked a Thursday, and threw all of it all back together again. So we would have to rebuy the food, the flowers, the cake, everything, but just throw it together, right? All right. So I didn't feel like anything was stolen at that point from me. We know that the devil is a thief and a liar, and he doesn't take things that aren't valuable. I really felt like that wedding was going to happen. And then it didn't. So I think about a week and a half after, not even a week and a half after the cancellation in August, we were in the beginning of September, and it was, I want to say, a Tuesday morning, and I was in bed sleeping. It was early, and my phone started to ring, and it was my brother. My brother, if you don't know him, you should, because he's got a personality and a sense of humor where you're not sure if he's kidding, but he can handle things so calmly. So he calls me and he says, I brought Dad to a doctor's appointment this morning, and they said that he's getting admitted to the hospital and he needs surgery, like emergency surgery. And I'm like, what? For what? And he just, a very monotone, very relaxed, I think it's open heart surgery. What? I think I hung up on him after that. and I called my mother immediately. So I hung up on my brother and I called my mother, who was inconsolable. She didn't go to the appointment because of COVID. And so she had decided, for my brother to drive him. The appointment was in Pittsburgh. And so, um, you know, my mom and dad had been married for over 52 years. They've been together since she was 16. They have 3 kids, many grandchildren, a great granddaughter. They've done everything together in this life. And I mean, they go to doctor's appointments like together. They go to the dentist together. Had COVID not happened, she would have been there. So my mother, who is just inconsolable, and I mean, I want my husband. I want my husband. I want to be with your father right now. I said, fine. I got dressed. I think I brushed my teeth. I may or may not have washed my face, and I drove to get her. And off to Pittsburgh we went. When we got to the hospital, they had moved him to a hospital by that point. And we walked into the room. My dad was so somber. It was like he had been caught doing something wrong. And my brother, I think it finally set in that this is serious. Within an hour, these surgeons, heart surgeons, had come into the room, and they would just introduce themselves and said, this is what we're going to do. This is what he needs. He will die if he leaves this hospital. Now, my dad genetically did not hit the lotto for hearts. He struggled. He had heart attacks, not many. But my father follows up with his cardiologist religiously. They do these cath procedures to get out any buildup. They have put stents in to make sure that the blood flow is good. And he takes medication. My dad's not an overweight man. He walks. He, works in the yard. He watches how much salt he has. I'm just saying, this was not something that we saw coming because, yes, we knew that genetically he had some heart issues, but open heart surgery, I mean, they're going to cut into your chest. They're going to break your ribs. We didn't see that coming. When the doctors and the surgeons came in, there was again that the air was sucked out of the room, and it was just I just kept, where are you, God? Where are you? Are you here? I don't feel like you're here. You know how they say that nothing happens unless God allows it. So you wonder, what's the purpose of this? Is there a purpose? Is all of this just meaningless? Is this just happening to happen? They scheduled his surgery on his birthday. His birthday was the 13th of September. They would have done it sooner, but he was on a blood thinner, and they had to give him some time to get that out of his system because obviously, he'd bleed out. My dad had a many-hour operation where they did a bypass. They didn't do one bypass, they did 5. And they took veins from his legs to rebuild them in his chest, into his heart. And for the week leading up to that surgery, my family, my sister, my brother, my mom, my dad, and I, we ate dinner together. We prayed together. We watched games on TV, the Steelers game. We took walks to the cafeteria to get snacks. You don't know. Like, you just don't know. So, coming to the date of the surgery, I remember I was driving home on 43. And it was dark, and I was by myself. And there was no lights for some reason. It was like so dark. And I drove home in complete silence. It was just completely no radio, no music. And I had this whole conversation in my head. You don't own a black dress. If your father dies, what are you going to wear? That's the quiet part, right? So we got through the surgery. And I was, my mom and my family, we had a really good surgeon who did a good operation. And now it was my dad's turn to do his work, which was, you have to learn how to walk again. Because, it basically takes the wind out of you every time you try to stand up or sit up. That's a hard surgery. So I was determined. To be there every single day and help him do that work. And then I remembered, I'm getting married. So for the second time, within a very short span of time, I canceled the wedding. The second time around, my vendors, well, the majority of them were okay, but a couple were not so nice. I think they thought I just didn't want to get married, which was not the case. I offered them whatever they needed. I think I even offered insurance records. I don't remember. I just know that they were not walking in love and patience and kindness. Let's put it that way. This was, okay, you used up your credit with me, figure it out. I didn't really have time to think about it, I guess. I just thought, it's my duty as his daughter to make the priority. So I did. Now, I ended up being at that hospital every day. And the first day, my dad was in and out of sleep a lot. The second day, But by the third day, I want to say that there were things that I was not expecting, not prepared for, that started to happen that I wish that I would have known. Those surgeons went over so many things like, well, this could happen and that could happen and infection could happen and this could happen. But they what they didn't tell me was that that bypass machine is going to keep your father alive. It's going to, they're going to stop his heart from beating for a time. And they're going to breathe for him, and they're going to circulate his blood. That's what the bypass machine does. And all under heavy amounts of anesthesia for a long period of time. Well, that's going to cause something to happen in the brain. And it did in his case. They never prepared me for this. They didn't prepare any of us for this. And I guess I thought, we were over that hump, and then I went in and my dad didn't know where he was. I sat down and he was finally awake, and I was just so relieved because he was sitting up, and and he just he didn't know that he was in a hospital. He would look outside. My dad was in Vietnam, and he would look outside and think he was on the ship in the Navy that he was on. He was seeing things that weren't there. And he was terrified. He did not know he had surgery. He did not know, he was in a hospital room. And so, it's a form of dementia that comes only after this kind of surgery from anesthesia and from the bypass machine. And sometimes it goes away and sometimes it doesn't. So I went in one day during his hospital stay after realizing, okay, this is going to be a little bit more tricky than I thought. And I was alone and giving my mother a break. My mom was there so much that she wasn't sleeping and eating and taking care of herself. And, my brother was taking time off work, and I have some flexibility because I own my own company. So I was working from the hospital. So I was there alone. And I remember this one day, he sat up and this nurse came in. And my dad looked at her and he was terrified of her. And then he turned to look at me and he said, "Missy," which is what my family calls me, "she only has half of a face." And I had to have a conversation. I had to have a conversation with my father where our roles were reversed for like the first time in my life, where I had to make him look at me and I had to say, "She's not real. I'm real. Look at me. I'm your daughter. Today is whatever day. You're in the hospital. You had surgery. This is real. That's not real." And after that happened, he laid back down and went to take a nap. And I will say that I felt completely defeated. I completely felt defeated. I thought, I don't know why any of this is happening. I call myself a Christian, and I don't feel like anybody is on my side. After we had that moment where I had to explain to him what was real, he lay down and took a nap. And I just remember I felt so defeated. And I felt like I call myself a Christian and I follow this God. I follow our God, and I don't feel like he's here. I feel like I'm alone. I don't feel like he's shown up. I don't know why he's allowing all of these things to happen. I had a lot of people praying for us. I messaged anybody with with ears that would listen to please pray. And so I put on some praise and worship. I remember this. This is like one of my favorite moments with God. I thought that, you know, I was really mad at God. And then I put on some praise and worship in the hospital room, and my dad was asleep. And he was in a recliner, and I was sitting in a chair. I put my phone down, and it was just like the most beautiful moment where my dad sat up, like tried to sit up, because he could hear this music, and he quoted a scripture, which was 1 Timothy, and it was, for God does not give us the spirit of fear or timidity, but one of power, love, and a sound mind. And I thought that finally God gave me something. And even though it was my dad who was afraid, I think that was for my fear also. I don't think it was just for his. You know, my dad came home, and slowly, you know, little pieces of him came back. It took time. I wish that they would have prepared us for that. I don't know that it would have made a difference, though, because as children, you know, if we think about our parents, seeing them in any condition other than what is familiar and comfortable is scary. And so, you know, that was one of the hardest, you know, it was one of the hardest experiences as a child that I went through. But God allowed it. And I wasn't really sure why. And I was, you know, I was just praying that there wouldn't be anything else, that, okay, we're through these, like, you know, these little humps that we needed to get over. And Scott and I eloped. We ended up eloping. We never got to have our wedding. Never got to wear the dress. You know, to put it into perspective, what I thought was so important wasn't. So in December, we had a baby shower for my daughter. For those of you who don't know, I have a 25-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old son. But in this case, I'm going to be talking about my daughter. She is married, and she was carrying her first child in the same year that all of these things happened. In December, we had a beautiful shower for her. She was having a girl, and you know, I could not wait to see this baby's face. I could not wait for my daughter to become a mother. I couldn't wait to become a grandmother. So I was thinking that my granddaughter's birth was going to be kind of like the thing that's going to make everything that I had just gone through worth it, right? Like, at least I got this baby. You know, I've gone through some things this year, but we're going to have this little baby. But again, it was not what happened to my daughter was not what we were expecting. My daughter had a normal pregnancy. She did not have any conditions, wasn't on any medications during her pregnancy. You know, that wasn't it, you know, like the high risk, anything like that. This was her first baby. Everything was going well. Everybody in this family was looking forward to the birth of this child, and me especially. She was scheduled for an induction in January. And, you know, with first babies being unpredictable, we just assumed, okay, she's going to be induced on this day. As it turns out, she went into natural labor a week before. She had called me and said, Mom, you know, I'm bleeding. And, you know, she had sent me some pictures. This is what girls with their moms do. So I went and picked her up, and her husband, myself, and her all went to the hospital, where they checked her and said that she was at 3 centimeters and that they were going to be keeping her. It was a Thursday night, and the doctor who she saw throughout her pregnancy, and also the doctor who was going to be doing her induction, was not there. He had, his daughter was getting married. That's the truth of it. And he wasn't there. So, and I don't fault him for that in any way. I'm just saying he wasn't there. Obviously the hospital has other doctors, but this was a hospital that had a lot of residents, and, you know, residents are doing their residency, and they're not quite doctors yet. They're allowed to practice, so that they have to get so many hours in so that they can become those doctors. But she had a senior and a junior resident that were mainly the ones that were taking care of her. The night that she had delivered, you know, and she had a normal, let me say this, a normal, you know, I don't want to say delivery, but labor. She, you know, progressed normally, got an epidural, nothing went wrong. Baby's heartbeat was good. Blood pressure seemed to be fine. Every so often they'd go a little bit weird, but most of the time they were fine. I was going to be in the room with her husband, and so we were just waiting. You know, she was sleeping, eating ice chips, things like that. When it came time to push, you know, there was still no doctor. It was just 2 residents, and they were preparing the room, and, you know, we were just anticipating and waiting and waiting. We knew that she was going to be a bigger baby. And so, you know, and this being her first, I just assumed it's going to take her a little time to push her out. Around 2 hours, when I noticed that the senior resident kept getting called out of the room quite a bit. There were a lot of other women on the floor in labor. And the reason that I knew this was because in their hallways, there were TVs everywhere with each room, their contractions. And you could count, there were 6, 7 other women in labor on that night. So they're doing everything they can to, you know, get her to push this baby out. And the senior keeps leaving and coming back, leaving and coming back. Well, she finally left once and then came back in. And I remember her walking in and just saying, okay, we're going to have to make a decision. It's either going to be a C-section or the vacuum. Now, if you're a woman and you've had children, the difference between the two of those things is night and day. I never had a C-section. I have 2 children. I would not choose one unless it was absolutely necessary. Some women do choose that, and they just think, okay, I get to go home and I'm fine, and I'm in and out of the hospital, and I don't have to wear this, and I don't have to do that, and I don't. No, 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 no. I didn't ever want a C-section. Now with my daughter, they did use a vacuum, and she came out in a couple pushes with the vacuum. So I said to my daughter when those options were put on the table, honey, I had one when I was delivering you, the baby might have a little spot on their head from it. May even get a little bit of jaundice from the vacuum, but, it's going to help her come out. Now, these 2 residents never brought a doctor into the room. They got out this vacuum. They put the vacuum on the baby's head, and instead of easing out, they pulled as hard and as fast as just pulled. And out my granddaughter came. When she came out, there was such like a sigh of, oh, thank God, she's out. Yes, praise God. She's crying. I stood back. I let mom and dad have their moment. I'm recording. But I knew pretty quickly something is wrong. Something is off. This is not how this is supposed to go. My daughter, about 10 minutes after that baby was out, not even, was turning white. She kept holding her head and shaking. And the room was a little bit colder. She had the temperature turned down because she was hot. So I just got the baby dressed and I handed her to Daddy. And I went over to take care of my daughter. I knew something was wrong. And she looked at me and she just kept saying, is this normal? Am I supposed to feel like I'm going to faint? I feel like I'm going to faint. Now, in the meantime, these 2 residents are taking their time and they're sewing her. Apparently, there was some tearing. They did not tell us at the time how bad the tearing was, and they never called for a doctor to come in. Every minute that passed by, the one thing that I noticed about the room was there was more and more blood. I had never seen so much blood in my life. There was blood on the cart. There was blood on my daughter. There was blood on the floor. There was blood on me. There was blood on all over the residence. There was blood on the bed. And I knew something was wrong. You can't lose that much blood. That's why she feels like she's going to faint. Her blood pressure kept going up. Her, alarms would go off. The residents were saying, call the blood bank. And pretty soon I realized that this is an emergency. There's an emergency in this room. The resident that, was, okay, we got to hurry up and get this done. She was there. She wasn't going anywhere anymore. It took them almost an hour for them to finish sewing what would be those tears. And they still couldn't stop the bleeding. They took her out of the room at one point, and I remember when they were bringing her back in, they said, well, good news, she didn't have a heart attack. And I thought, why would she have a heart attack? She's 25, she's healthy. We were all exhausted. We had been up over 24 hours. My son-in-law, over 48 hours. He almost fainted multiple times. So we decided we're going to take a very quick nap. Baby's napping. Mama is back in the room. She's monitored. So we decided to take a quick nap. In the morning, that was Friday morning. I woke up and I thought, okay, I'm going to spend the day here and try to figure out what just happened yesterday. Now, in the meantime, they had never gotten her out of bed to walk around because of the tearing. What they decided to do instead was to just kind of leave the epidural in for a while to give her some comfort. So, I spent the day there. I attended to her and the baby. And then by Friday night, I knew I needed to go home and get some rest. I was exhausted. So I did. And I'm glad that I did because it almost cleared my mind. I went back Saturday morning, and when I did, I wanted to know exactly what happened. I walked into that hospital and I just started asking questions. I want to speak to a doctor. I want to speak to a pediatrician about the baby. I want to know what happened yesterday because no one was really giving us answers. And over the next several hours, I realized that they weren't going to give us any answers. They weren't really telling her either. She would say, "How many stitches do I have?" They wouldn't answer. She would say, "How much blood did I lose?" They wouldn't answer. I wanted to get her and the baby out of there. I wanted to bring them back to my house so that they could be a family outside of that hospital. And we did. We eventually, they got discharged and I brought them home. And over, the next few days, it was me getting to spend time with my daughter and her new baby and my son-in-law. And it was wonderful. And then once again, something happened. She was discharged on a Monday, and by Friday of that week, she was running a fever. I had drove her to her OBGYN just to have her get a look at her, just to make sure everything was okay. This was the girl who saw her through her pregnancy, not the doctor, but the nurse practitioner. And that's when we finally kind of started to put together what exactly happened during that delivery. My daughter was given an exam while she was there, and one of the things that the nurse practitioner had informed her of was, "Do you know how many stitches you have?" That was one of the questions she had asked. We found out that day that my daughter was given over 66 internally. If you're a woman and you've given birth, you know what 66 stitches is. That's insanity. How bad was this tear? How bad? Is that why she was hemorrhaging? How much blood did she lose? A lot. So we found out that as well. They couldn't really determine what the fever was from, so they gave her a shot of some antibiotics, and she was to take Tylenol and ibuprofen, whatever, to help bring that fever down. So I took her back home, and, my daughter really felt like, depending on how tomorrow goes, we're going to try to go home. The next day, which was Saturday, was probably one of the worst days of my life as a mother. And I say that and I mean it. My daughter had woke up with the best intentions to get, out of the house and back home. And when she got up and she made herself a sandwich and then said, "I'm going to get a quick shower," everything was fine. When she came back downstairs from getting the shower, that look of something is wrong, like the day she delivered when she had her hand on her head, that was all over her face. I laid her down on the couch and she just kept saying, I'm sick, something's wrong. And she was shaking. She felt like she was going to faint. And I just kept telling her to lay still. I was going to call the doctor. And before I knew it, she was sitting up and just vomiting all over herself. I put her in the car and I took her to the closest hospital because I thought, what if she's having a heart attack? What if she has a blood clot? Our closest hospital isn't always the best hospital. It's just the closest hospital. And so while we were there, I watched my daughter scream and cry from a hospital bed. And nobody do anything. She was begging me for me to help her. She was begging me to do something. I kept opening the door to look for anybody. And I was always met with, close the door, it's the COVID policy. Just the same as I had that feeling, that just the same as I had that conversation each time in my head, the quiet part, I started to think to myself, what if she doesn't make it? What if something's really wrong? My daughter was screaming in a hospital bed. And I was completely helpless. I did not have any control. I couldn't do anything to make it any better. I just knew something was really wrong. She was not making this up. This was not normal. A doctor did eventually come in, and a doctor examined her and just said, we don't have the technology here to determine if there's something wrong. Maybe she pulled a muscle. And she begged that doctor, she begged him not to send her home. But he did. So I put her in my car and I drove her again to a bigger hospital. And over the next 4 hours, they had found that she had a multitude of things wrong, some of which could kill her. She spent the next 6 weeks in a women's hospital. She missed so much of her daughter's first 7 weeks, which you're only a newborn for 7 weeks, and my daughter missed 6 weeks of that. In the end, she had a blood clot that was very big that rested on her adrenal gland, which was why she felt the pain, that she felt like she couldn't breathe. And she ended up with sepsis in the lining of her uterus. They had to give her very strong medications. This was not because she didn't take care of herself. This was because of the way that the tears were handled. And I just want to say, something. We have absolutely no case right now. We have no anything to... No, we're not going to be like moving forward. This is not our way of trying to throw those residents or the hospital under the bus. I am telling you because these are things that this experience completely, just as the two before it, completely affected me. my spirit, my mind, and my body. When she finally came home and she was better, I finally slept. I remember I finally slept. Like, I slept good. And I had a lot of anger towards that hospital. I had a lot of anger at the way that things were handled. Our children, it doesn't matter how old they are. It does not matter what age they get to. It does not matter. That's your children. Those are your babies. And my daughter, I don't care how old she gets. You, as a parent, want to take care of them. You want to fix what's wrong. And I couldn't. I had a lot. I carried a lot of anxiety and true story before all of these things happened. Before all of these things happened. After those things happened and I went through those experiences, I was in bed one night and I was watching some TikToks or something online, and I saw this guy and he was going around and he would give money to these homeless people and he would pray with them. You didn't see it, but he prayed with them. And if you kind of like dug into the comments, you'd find what he prayed for them for. And I remember thinking, God, I want to do something like that. Why can't I do something like that? I want to help other people. And then that night I prayed, and I really prayed though, like really prayed. And I said, God, can I just ask you why you weren't there? Where were you? From August until February, that's 6 months. Where were you? Why did you let these things happen? Where were you? In those 6 months, where were you? And this was another very intimate moment with God. I had my eyes closed and he took me back to each room. He took me to the bedroom, on the day of my wedding. That didn't happen, the first one that got canceled. And he showed me where he was. And he showed me on the bed by myself. I was here and you were there. And then he showed me with my dad when I was driving home, and I said, I don't own a black dress. He said, I was here and you were there. And then with my daughter, when I was standing there saying, where are you? He said, I was here and you were there. That really happened. I truly saw that in my head. He really showed me that. And I thought, okay, fair enough. Sorry that I didn't know. I didn't know. I don't know why I didn't know, but I didn't know. I was wrong. So what is the point of these 3 stories? The point that I'm telling you for. Okay. And I'm going to make this quick because my stories took so long and I was so emotional. You know what? I think God allowed me to go through those things because I needed to be almost like reborn. No, we become born again when we accept Christ. That's not what I'm talking about. It was kind of like going through birth pains, right? You go through those pains and then you come out and you're a different person on the other end of it. You're a new person.
I don't mean that in some new age way. Please don't take it that way. I just mean that here I was this person who called myself a Christian, who may or may not have listened to praise and worship. I did, but I mean, I wasn't like I am now. Everything has changed for me now. Those experiences have made me more aware of my relationship or lack thereof with God. They have made me more sensitive to other people's struggles. They have made me, God has given me a peace that I can't explain. Where I didn't always have that peace. I never had that peace. I do now. And when I see someone struggling, I go back in my mind to one of those three places. And I immediately pray for them. And I pray with them. Everything has changed in my life. And I am so glad that it did. I wish that it didn't take those things for me to go through. I mean, we all have things that we go through. We go through a ton of things. It's not going through them, you know, it's while we're going through them. How do we act? Who are we? Do we go get a bottle of wine and get drunk? Do we go get high? Do we, you know, become angry and mean and cruel to the world? I guess I didn't. I did whatever I thought. I did what I thought was the right thing. Just like God said to me, you need to do the right thing with your wedding. I did what I thought was the right thing from the very beginning. And I really believe God allows things to happen for multiple different reasons. People love to ask, like, why are there school shootings and why are there kids with cancer? And they always want to ask a Christian that, right? Because they feel like you should know. Because that's your God, right? So let me say this. I don't have an explanation for why everything happens. But I do have an idea of why certain things are allowed to happen. And I've told this story before, and I've told this story to others who are going through something. So if you've heard this one before, just bear with me. But if you haven't, I want you to hear it. Jesus was walking with his disciples, and he comes across a blind man, and the disciples say, Jesus, why is he blind? Was it because of his sin or his parents' sin? And Jesus says, he was not made blind because of anyone's sin. He was blind so that the works of God may be shown through him. And then he healed him. I will always believe that there are things that God's going to allow us to go through so that the works of God may be seen. And he is never far away. Even when you can't find him, he's there. These things, these experiences have completely changed who I am. They're a big part of why I have this ministry and why I want to help other people, other women. Had they not happened, I don't know that I'd be here. I really don't. That's all I wanted to tell you about tonight. I want to thank everybody for watching this. We're going to have more new videos coming out very, very soon. I have a couple new guests lined up. I appreciate you taking the time to watch these very long videos, especially this one, which is one of the first with me alone. So it means a lot to me. If you can remember to let me know how you liked it in the comments. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for watching. Keep me in your prayers and pray for each other. And if you're going through something, if you're going through anything and you don't know why, you're not alone. You're not alone. God loves you. He's not going to leave you there by yourself. And he's not going to do it to punish you. Feel free to reach out if you need prayer, if you need somebody to pray with you. But you're not alone.